let's try to get a clearer idea, I should say, on these two injuries. Dr. Kevin McHale, Cape Regional Health Systems, with Pet Orthopedics and Cape Regional Health Systems. You get the best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit caperegional.com/orthopedics. Now, Doc, we sure wish that we weren't talking about two players of this magnitude. But, man, in the same week they lose these guys. How you been?
I've been doing all right, but much better than the Sixers this week, that's for sure.
Man. So let's start with Ben Simmons, who it is a impingement of the nerve in his lower back. Now, backs are always so tricky. You know, there's times where guys we've heard have broken backs, and we've talked about during the football season where they only miss a game or so. But when you see Ben Simmons, you know, out for at least 2 weeks before he gets reevaluated, an impinged nerve, what does that kind of tell you?
Yeah, it does make me a lot more concerned than when they initially mentioned that he had some back tightness. You know, we see low back pain in our athletes all the time, you know, some muscle spasms and tightness. But once you hear the term nerve impingement getting thrown around, we know it's something much more significant. So obviously for a nerve to be impinged, that means it's being pinched. It has to be pinched by something. Most commonly, that's a disc herniation, that structure, that's a shock-absorbing little structure in between your vertebrae of your low back. And with a lot of the repetitive twisting mechanisms and the landing and compression force that these basketball players have from jumping constantly, these discs can herniate or actually start bulging out and irritate nerve roots. Now, they didn't release that, if that is in fact what happened to Ben Simmons or not, but that's the most common reason why a nerve gets pinched. And when that happens, the nerve becomes very inflamed. Initially, it will present with some back pain, but that pain can also start to shoot down the length of the nerve down into the leg, sometimes associated with numbness and tingling, maybe some weakness as well. So the problem is once you hear the term nerve impingement, it takes usually much longer for those symptoms to resolve as opposed to just your typical back soreness or muscle strain. Typically, you know, they mentioned coming back and checking back in 2 weeks, but typically these take at least 4 to 6 weeks, if not longer. And it's for the symptoms to completely resolve, at least, unless it's a much more mild thing than it sounds like it is based on the initial reports.
Yeah, and it seems weird because he played in the All-Star game 29 minutes, and then right after that it was like, hey, he's not playing tonight. And then he tried to play the next night, seemed to be okay. So what does that kind of say? Was that he was out there, he had a layup, he looked pretty good in the 5 minutes that he played, and then he came up a little lame, and the next thing you know, his back tightens up, and now this. So I don't know. It seems like there was no clear-cut reason or what happened, why he suffered this injury.
Yeah, it does get a little bit more confusing for sure. So if he had a big collision with a player, a big fall, and he clearly went out with a big one specific event, we know then there might be a larger herniation and something that we're much more concerned about. The fact that he didn't have that big one event that we heard of, and the fact that he was, after the initial injury, I think it was sometime in practice after the All-Star game, and then he was able to try playing with it, and then got re-aggravated it. Hopefully that just means it's a much more mild injury, but something's irritating that nerve root. But hopefully it's not a very large herniated disc. When we hear about those large disc herniations that are really providing a lot of compression on the nerve, that's when they start throwing around the idea of surgery to take that part of the disc out and relieve the pressure. It does not seem like that's the case for Ben Simmons. He didn't have that one big episode of some big collision or some big injury, and hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully it's something much more mild and will resolve with this non-operative management, as many of these low back nerve root irritations can get better with non-operative management.
Right, because the fact that he sat one game out and then played, for sitting the game out, someone would have had to check him out before that game, right, to say, hey, your back hurts, we're going to sit you out tonight. But wouldn't somebody kind of clear him to play the next game?
Yeah, so if he had some type of soreness, he would absolutely have been evaluated by the medical staff, the athletic training staff, just to make sure that he was safe to go out there and play. Sometimes if there's some type of injury to the low back, they may have had maybe some mild little disc herniation or bulge. And actually, if you get MRIs of all these athletes, you can see evidence of a disc herniation or bulge that was chronic and just had been there from some injury down the line that it just kind of stayed there. So it doesn't, you don't just get an MRI every single time, but he may not have had other symptoms that seemed like the nerve root was irritated. It could have just been some low back pain. They may have treated him with your typical therapy for an athlete that has a sore low back, and maybe they didn't rush to get an MRI or anything like that right away, thinking that since he had just this low back pain, he may be safe to get out there. He wasn't having symptoms that are concerning to a physician. Maybe he didn't have the numbness and tingling. Maybe he didn't have weakness. Because we see people with back injuries all the time, and if they have full strength, no true what we call neurologic deficits where they don't have numbness and tingling or weakness, we deem them safe to go out there and play even if it's sore. So it could be that he had a more mild injury, something safe enough to play with, but once he got out there, he realized he wasn't able to play and that this was something more significant.
All right, so the impinged nerve, they're going to reevaluate in 2 weeks, but it sounds like you think that it's not going to be 2 weeks he'll be playing, that's just going to be a reevaluation, that this is a 4 to 6 week, if not longer, time frame.
Yeah, based on what we have now, but hopefully I'm wrong, and hopefully it's something much more mild, and we see him out on the court in 2 weeks. We know the Sixers need him to make the end of the season stretch here to make a good playoff push. So hopefully I'm wrong, but I don't really expect to see him in 2 weeks, to be honest.
All right, so Dr. Kevin McHale with us, Cape Regional, Penn Orthopedics. Let's look at Joel Embiid, left shoulder sprain. He's been ruled out tonight. It was a kind of a collision. He immediately grabbed that collarbone area. It has been tweeted out that he has either an AC sprain or an SC sprain, depending on the grade. His recovery time anywhere from 7 to 10 days or an upwards of 3 to 4 weeks. But I don't know if you saw it or looked at the video at all, but he kind of collided with the defender and immediately grabbed that area. He was kind of wincing. He did shoot the 2 free throws. He missed them both. But after that, you could see him wincing at the top of the free throw there. So, again, you're not treating Embiid, but what did you see from, watching that and then just kind of having some insight on that area of the shoulder?
Sure. So we went through something very, very similar back in November with Simmons, right? Simmons had a collision with another player and had a mild AC joint separation or sprain. He didn't have a separation, but a mild AC joint sprain, and he ended up missing a couple of games, I think about 1 week before he got back to play, and obviously had a great season up until this recent injury. So hopefully that's what we're dealing with Embiid. I did see the video. It was just a collision with another player right on the court, not necessarily a high-energy mechanism of injury. So hopefully whatever type of sprain he has is fairly mild. He did happen to grab his collarbone. If it's something like an AC sprain that Simmons had, hopefully it's a fairly mild one, and we see him back on the court pretty soon, maybe after just a couple of games of lost time. And the SC joint injury, like we had with Tyreek Hill earlier, in the fall, is much less common, although possible. Again, not a huge collision there, so I would think, much less severe as compared to what Tyreek Hill went through when he had to go to the hospital and get it reduced. Very different situation. So I'm hoping, based on that little bit of video that we have, and that's all the information we have to go by, that we're not looking at a prolonged absence. Obviously, sometimes this video is kind of deceiving, and you find out later on that it was a much bigger injury. But based on the little information we know, we're hoping that something similar that Simmons went through back in the fall, and maybe only a game or two off for Embiid, and we see him back on the court.
Yeah, MRI today. We don't have the results. He is not playing tonight, but that doesn't give us, a clear picture of what could be happening with Joel Embiid here. But all we know is that that shoulder area up there. Now, could just watching that and him grabbing it could be like, I don't want to, like a broken collarbone or fractured something somewhere in that area?
So, where he did grab his collarbone. That's possible. It's very unlikely just based on the force. It didn't seem like there was enough force to cause a fracture of a collarbone there. And also, typically, although they didn't release any information at all, most of the time they would have gotten x-rays that night in the stadium. And typically, if there was a true fracture at that time, they released that information without waiting for an MRI. So although that is where he grabbed, I think that the fact that they haven't released any of that information to us yet means that there wasn't a true fracture or dislocation, at least in my opinion, based on what we have available to us, and that if anything, it's more of one of these possibly, most likely an AC joint sprain, maybe that SC joint sprain. But we'll have to see what they say after the MRI results are let out to the public.
All right. Well, we'll hope to see Embiid back sooner than later. It looks like later for Ben Simmons. And again, Dr. Kevin McHale with Cape Regional Health System and Penn Orthopedics, the best of both worlds for a healthier life. For an appointment, call 609-463-CAPE or visit caperegional.com/orthopedics.